The sirens screamed through the quiet suburban evening as 3 police cars surrounded Marcus's house, their red and blue lights painting the windows of his childhood home, where his family had gathered for his grandmother's 90th birthday. Karen from next door stood on her pristine lawn, arms crossed, smugly watching as officers approached the front door till she saw the news van pulling up behind them. Her satisfied smile faltered as she realized the cameras weren't there for Marcus. They were there for her husband, the corrupt city councilman whose arrest warrant had just been issued. And now the whole neighborhood would witness her own world crumbling while the family, Marcus Williams, adjusted his tie one final time. As he surveyed the backyard of his childhood home, paper lanterns swayed gently in the evening breeze, casting warm amber light across the carefully arranged tables where his extended family would soon celebrate his grandmother's 90th birthday. The smell of his aunt's famous barbecue drifted from the smoking grill, mixing with the sweet scent of magnolia blossoms from the ancient tree that had shaded 3 generations of family gatherings. "You did good, baby," his wife Sarah said, sliding her arm around his waist. "Grandma Rose is going to cry when she sees all this." Marcus smiled, feeling the familiar weight of responsibility that came with being the family's unofficial event coordinator. At 35, he'd inherited more than just his grandmother's house. When she moved to assisted living, he'd inherited the role of family anchor, the one who kept traditions alive and brought everyone together. 23 people, he murmured. Doing a final head count, haven't had this many family members in one place since Uncle Jerome's funeral. The first cars began arriving at 5 o'clock sharp. His cousins from Atlanta pulled up in their rental van, kids already bouncing with excitement. His sister Monica emerged from her sedan with her teenage daughters, both glued to their phones but grinning at the sight of the decorations. Uncle Charles limped up the front steps, his bad hip not slowing his enthusiasm for family barbecue. "Marcus," his grandmother's voice carried across the yard as his cousin David wheeled her through the back gate. Rose Williams, despite her 9 years, still commanded attention when she entered a room. Her silver hair was perfectly styled, her Sunday dress immaculate, and her dark eyes sparkled with the kind of mischief that had made her legendary in their family. Grandma Rose. Marcus swept her into a careful hug, breathing in her familiar scent of lavender and vanilla. "Happy birthday, beautiful." "Oh, honey, you didn't have to do all this," she said, but her voice was thick with emotion as she took in the sight of her family gathered around tables laden with her favorite foods. "Lord knows I've lived long enough to see too many empty chairs at these gatherings." As the evening progressed, the backyard filled with the sounds Marcus remembered from childhood. His uncle's booming laugh, his cousins debating politics, children shrieking with joy as they chased fireflies. His teenage nephew DJ had set up speakers and was playing a mix of old-school R&B and current hits, the music threading through conversations like a soundtrack to their shared history. Sarah moved through the crowd with practiced ease, making sure everyone had drinks and seconds of the food. She'd been part of the family for 8 years now, since she and Marcus married. But she'd earned her place through moments like these, showing up, helping out, caring for people who weren't, even her blood relatives. "Your wife's a keeper," Grandma Rose said, watching Sarah help Marcus's elderly great-aunt navigate the buffet line. "That girl's got a servant's heart." Marcus nodded, about to respond when he noticed movement in the house next door. Karen Blackwood stood at her kitchen window, her pale face pressed against the glass, watching their gathering with the intensity of someone studying evidence. Her lips were pressed into a thin line, and even from across the yard, Marcus could see the disapproval radiating from her posture. He'd lived in this house for 3 years now, ever since Grandma Rose moved to Sunset Manor, and his relationship with Karen had been strained from day one. She'd made it clear that she preferred when the house sat empty, when the neighborhood maintained what she called a certain standard. The fact that a young black family had moved into what she considered her territory had never sat well with her, though she was too careful to say so directly. "Daddy, who's that lady staring at us?" His 7-year-old niece, Zoe, had noticed Karen's surveillance. "That's just the neighbor, sweetie. Don't worry about her." But Marcus was worried. Karen had a history of calling the homeowners association about every minor infraction she could imagine. Grass that was a half-inch too long, trash cans left out an hour past pickup time, the musical wind chimes Sarah had hung on the front porch. Most of her complaints were dismissed, but they were a constant source of stress, As if summoned by his thoughts, Karen's back door opened, and she stepped onto her immaculate deck. She wore a crisp white blouse and pressed khakis, her blonde hair pulled back in a severe bun that made her thin face look even more pinched than usual. She stood there for a moment, hands on her hips, surveying their celebration like a general studying a battlefield. "Evening, Karen," Marcus called out, raising his beer in a friendly greeting. Several of his family members turned to look, and he felt the familiar tension that came with being the bridge between his family and the white neighbors who tolerated their presence. Karen didn't return the greeting. Instead, she pulled out her phone and began taking pictures of their gathering, her movements deliberate and pointed. "What's she doing?" Sarah appeared at Marcus's elbow, her voice tight with concern. "Building a case," Marcus said grimly. "She's been looking for a reason to cause trouble." Uncle Charles, who'd been quietly observing the exchange, walked over to them. At 72, he'd lived through enough to recognize the signs of brewing conflict. "That woman's got a look I've seen before," he said quietly. "The kind of look that leads to problems." "She can't do anything," Sarah said, but her voice lacked conviction. "We're not breaking any laws, we're just having a family dinner." "Laws don't matter to people like her," Uncle Charles replied. "What matters is that we're here, and she doesn't think we should be." As the evening progressed, the family tried to ignore Karen's continued surveillance, but her presence cast a shadow over the celebration. She made multiple phone calls, each one conducted while staring directly at their gathering. She documented everything: the number of cars, the volume of the music, the children playing in the yard. Around 8 o'clock, as the birthday cake was being brought out, Karen made her move. She walked to the property line that separated their yards and called out in a voice calculated to carry across the gathering. "Excuse me," she said, her tone dripping with false politeness. "I'm trying to enjoy a quiet evening, and your little party is getting quite loud." The backyard fell silent. 23 pairs of eyes turned toward Karen, and Marcus felt the weight of his family's expectations. This was his house, his grandmother's birthday, and his responsibility to handle. "I'm sorry if we're disturbing you," Marcus said, walking toward the property line. "We're just celebrating my grandmother's 90th birthday. We'll try to keep it down." "This is a residential neighborhood," Karen continued, her voice rising with each word. "Not some kind of public park where you can have block parties whenever you want. Some of us have jobs and need to get up early." "Ma'am," Grandma Rose's voice cut through the tension like a blade. Despite her age, she commanded attention as she wheeled herself toward the property line. "I've lived in this neighborhood for 67 years. I raised my children in this house, buried my husband from this front porch, and celebrated more birthdays, graduations, and holidays than you've probably lived to see. If you have a problem with my family celebrating my birthday, you can take it up with the Lord, because I'm not interested in hearing it." Karen's face flushed red, but she wasn't backing down. "I don't care how long you've lived here. I have rights, and I'm not going to stand for this noise and disruption." "What noise?" Marcus's cousin David stepped forward, his voice tight with controlled anger. "Kids playing, people talking, music at a reasonable volume." "Don't you dare get smart with me," Karen snapped. "I know exactly what this is about. You people think you can move into a nice neighborhood and turn it into some kind of ghetto." The words hung in the air like a physical blow. Several family members started to respond, but Marcus held up his hand, his jaw clenched so tight it hurt. "I think you need to go back inside," he said quietly, but there was steel in his voice. "Now, I don't take orders from you," Karen shot back. "This is America, and I have rights. If you can't respect your neighbors, then maybe you shouldn't be living here." That's when Uncle Charles stepped forward. At 6'3", he still cut an imposing figure despite his age and limp. "Young lady," he said, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd faced down worse than suburban racism. "To cross a line, you can't uncross. I suggest you think real careful about your next words." Karen looked around the gathering, taking in the faces of 3 generations of the Williams family. For a moment, Marcus thought she might apologize, might step back. The first police car arrived within 12 minutes of Karen's call, its headlights cutting through the gathering dusk as it pulled into the Williams driveway. Marcus felt his stomach drop as he watched Officer Janet Rodriguez step out of the vehicle, her hand resting casually on her utility belt. He'd met her before at community meetings. She was one of the good ones. Someone who actually listened before making assumptions. "Stay where you are, everyone," Marcus called to his family, keeping his voice calm despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. "Let me handle this." Officer Rodriguez approached with measured steps, her eyes scanning the backyard scene. Elderly family members seated around tables, children holding pieces of birthday cake, decorations swaying in the breeze. Nothing about the gathering suggested criminal activity, and Marcus could see the confusion in her expression. "Evening, Marcus," she said, her tone professional but not hostile. "We received a call about a disturbance. Mind if we talk?" "Of course, Officer Rodriguez. There's no disturbance, here just my grandmother's 90th birthday party." Karen appeared at the property line like a vulture sensing opportunity. She'd changed into a different outfit, a conservative navy dress that made her look more respectable, more credible. Marcus realized she'd been planning this confrontation. "Officer, thank God you're here," Karen called out, her voice pitched to carry across both yards. "I've been trying to get them to quiet down for hours. They've been loud, aggressive, and when I asked them politely to respect the neighborhood, they became threatening." Officer Rodriguez looked between Karen and Marcus, then at the quiet gathering of family members. "Threatening how?" The older man there, Karen pointed at Uncle Charles, who was sitting peacefully with Grandma Rose. "He got in my face and intimidated me. I felt genuinely afraid for my safety." Uncle Charles slowly stood up, his movements deliberate and careful. "Officer, I'm 72 years old, with a bad hip. I haven't intimidated anyone in about 20 years, and I sure haven't gotten in anyone's face tonight." "He's lying," Karen said quickly. "They're all covering for each other. This is exactly what I was talking about. They think they can do whatever they want because they stick together." Officer Rodriguez pulled out her notepad, but Marcus could see the skepticism in her eyes. "Ma'am, can you be more specific about what threats were made?" He said, "I was crossing a line I couldn't uncross." "That's a threat, isn't it?" "That's a warning about consequences," Uncle Charles said dryly. "Specifically, the consequences of saying something racist that you'd regret." "Racist?" Karen's voice rose an octave. "I never said anything racist. I simply asked them to respect the neighborhood standards." "What standards would those be?" Officer Rodriguez asked. Karen fumbled for a moment, realizing she'd walked into a trap. "Well, the noise ordinance, for one, and the number of cars parked on the street, and they're clearly violating the HOA guidelines about large gatherings." Marcus felt a flash of anger. "Officer, I checked the city noise ordinance before we started. We're well within legal limits. The music is at conversation level, and it's not even 9 o'clock yet, and the HOA guidelines allow gatherings of up to 30 people with no prior notice required," Sarah added, stepping forward with a folder. In her hands, "I have the documentation right here." Officer Rodriguez accepted the folder and flipped through it quickly. Marcus watched Karen's face as she realized her neighbor had come prepared for this exact confrontation. "Ma'am, officer," Rodriguez said to Karen, "everything here appears to be in order. The noise level is reasonable, the gathering is within city and HOA guidelines, and I don't see any evidence of threatening behavior. But they were loud earlier," Karen insisted, "and that man definitely threatened me." "I told you to think carefully about your next words," Uncle Charles said calmly. "That's not a threat, that's advice. Same advice I'd give to anyone about to say something they might regret." A second police car pulled up, and Marcus felt the familiar dread that came with escalation. To officers was routine. 3 might mean someone believed Karen's story. But as Officer Mike Thompson emerged from the second car, Marcus relaxed slightly. Thompson was another community-minded cop who'd worked this beat for years. "What's the situation?" Rodriguez Thompson asked as he approached. "Noise complaint, but everything seems to be within legal parameters," Rodriguez replied. "The complainant alleges threatening behavior, but I'm not seeing evidence of that." Karen's face was growing redder by the minute. "This is ridiculous. I pay taxes in this neighborhood. I have rights. You can't just ignore my complaint because you're friends with them." "Ma'am, we're not friends with anyone," Officer Thompson said firmly. "We're evaluating the situation based on the law and the evidence. And right now, I don't see any violations." That's when Marcus noticed Karen's husband, Robert, emerging from their house. Robert Blackwood was a city councilman, a fact that Karen had mentioned at every HOA meeting for the past 3 years. He was a thin man in his 50s, with a kind of politician's smile that never quite reached his eyes. "Officers," Robert said as he approached, his voice carrying the practiced authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "I'm Councilman Robert Blackwood. My wife called about this disturbance, and I have to say I'm concerned about the response time and the apparent lack of action." Marcus felt the power dynamic shift. A city councilman's word carried weight, especially in a town where police funding was always up for discussion. He watched both officers stiffen slightly, their casual demeanor becoming more formal. "Councilman Blackwood," Officer Rodriguez said carefully, "we're handling this by the book. The gathering appears to be within all legal parameters." "Are you sure about that?" Robert asked, his tone suggesting he expected a different answer. "Because I'm seeing what looks like a very large gathering, multiple vehicles creating traffic issues, and noise that's clearly disturbing the peace." Marcus counted quickly. There were exactly 11 cars parked on the street, all legally positioned. The music was barely audible from where they stood, but he could see the calculation. In the officer's eyes, was it worth contradicting a city councilman over a noise complaint? "Dad, what are you doing?" A young voice cut through the tension. Everyone turned to see a teenage girl standing in the Blackwoods' backyard, her face flushed with embarrassment. "Go inside, Jessica," Robert said sharply. "This doesn't concern you." "Yes, it does," Jessica said, her voice growing stronger. "You're embarrassing our whole family. These people aren't doing anything wrong." Karen whirled around. "Jessica Marie Blackwood, you get in that house right now." "No, Mom, I'm 16, not 6. And I'm not going to stand here and watch you to be racist jerks to our neighbors." The word racist hung in the air like a gunshot. Officer Rodriguez and Thompson exchanged glances, while Marcus felt a surge of hope. Sometimes the truth came from unexpected sources. "I am not a racist," Karen said, her voice shaking with fury. "I am a concerned citizen trying to maintain property values and neighborhood standards." "By calling the cops on a birthday party," Jessica shot back. "Grandma Rose lives next door. Mom, she's 90 years old. What exactly do you think she's going to do to you?" Robert grabbed his daughter's arm. "That's enough. You're grounded. For what?" Telling the truth, Jessica yanked her arm free. "You want to know what's really going on here? Mom has been obsessing over this family since they moved in. She takes pictures of their house, she times when they come and go, she complains about everything they do. It's sick." Marcus watched Karen's face cycle through emotions: anger, embarrassment, panic. She'd been exposed by her own daughter, and everyone present could see the truth in Jessica's words. "Officers," Marcus said quietly, "I think we've established that there's no actual disturbance here. My family would like to finish celebrating my grandmother's birthday in peace." Officer Rodriguez nodded, but before she could respond, Robert stepped forward. "I'm not satisfied with this response," he said, his politician's mask slipping to reveal something uglier underneath. "I expect a thorough investigation of this situation. These people need to understand that actions have consequences." "What actions?" Officer Thompson asked, his patience clearly wearing thin. "Having a family gathering? Existing in their own backyard?" "Don't get smart with me, Thompson," Robert snapped. "I know who signs your paychecks." It was the wrong thing to say. Marcus watched both officers' expressions harden. Threatening a cop's job was a line that even city councilmen shouldn't cross, especially not in front of witnesses. "Councilman," Officer Rodriguez said, her voice ice cold, "are you suggesting that we should ignore the law and our professional judgment based on your political position?" Robert realized his mistake too late. "That's not what I meant, because that would be corruption," Officer Thompson added, "and that's something we take very seriously." The radio on Officer Rodriguez's belt crackled to life. "Unit 47. We have a priority situation. Need you to respond to 1247 Maple Street immediately." Marcus felt his blood freeze. 1247 Maple Street was the Blackwoods' address. "Roger that. Dispatch." "What's the nature of the call?" "We have a warrant for Robert Blackwood. Financial fraud charges. Suspect is considered a flight risk." The backyard fell silent, except for the sound of Karen's sharp eye. The news vans descended on Maple Street like vultures, sensing a feast. Within 30 minutes of Robert Blackwood's arrest, 3 local stations and a newspaper reporter had set up camp on the normally quiet residential street. The irony wasn't lost on Marcus. Corinne had wanted attention for their family gathering, and now she was getting more attention than she'd ever bargained for. Channel 7 News. We're live from Maple Street, where City Councilman Robert Blackwood has just been arrested on charges of financial fraud. The reporter's voice carried across the yard as Marcus watched Karen peek through her living room curtains, her face pale with shock. "Daddy, are we going to be on TV?" 7-year-old Zoe asked, tugging on Marcus's shirt. "Not if I can help it." "Sweetheart," Marcus replied, though he noticed several family members already trying to stay out of the camera shots. This was exactly the kind of attention that black families learned to avoid Evan when they were completely innocent. "Officer?" Rodriguez approached Marcus as the last of the evidence bags was loaded into the police car. "I want to apologize for how this went down," she said quietly. "We should have shut down her complaint from the start. It was obvious she was fishing for a reason to cause trouble." "You were just doing your job," Marcus replied, though he appreciated the acknowledgement. "But I have to ask, how long has the investigation into Councilman Blackwood been going on?" "About 6 months," Rodriguez said, glancing toward the Blackwood house where crime scene tape was being installed. "He's been skimming from the city's Community Development Fund. The FBI has been building their case, and the warrant came through today. Honestly, we had no idea he lived on this street until dispatch gave us the address." Marcus shook his head. "So while his wife was trying to get us in trouble for having a family party, he was stealing money meant to help the community." "That's about the size of it," Rodriguez confirmed. "The irony is pretty thick." As the officer walked away, Marcus turned his attention back to his family. Despite the chaos, they'd managed to salvage the celebration. Grandma Rose had finally blown out her candles, making a wish that she whispered only to the wind. The cake had been cut, photos had been taken, and the children had resumed their games in the backyard. Mr. Williams, a young woman with a press badge, approached the property line. "I'm Sarah Chen from Channel 7. Could we get a statement about what happened here tonight?" Marcus was about to decline when Uncle Charles stepped forward. "Actually, I think we should talk to them." "Uncle Charles, no, son. Listen to me." The older man's voice carried the weight of experience. "That woman spent all evening trying to paint us as the problem. Now the cameras are here, and they're going to tell a story whether we participate or not. Better to make sure they tell the right story." Marcus looked at his family, gathered around tables laden with birthday cake and love. Then, at the news crews documenting the arrest of a corrupt politician, Uncle Charles was right. This was a chance to control the narrative. "Okay," Marcus said to the reporter, "but we do this right. This is about my grandmother's birthday, not about whatever the Blackwoods have been up to." The interview was brief, but powerful. Marcus explained that they'd been celebrating his grandmother's 90th birthday when their neighbor called police, alleging noise violations and threatening behavior. The reporter quickly grasped the real story of family gathering. Had been disrupted by a neighbor's complaint, only to have that neighbor's husband arrested for embezzling public funds. "It's ironic," Marcus said to the camera. "We were accused of not respecting the neighborhood, but it turns out the person who was actually harming the community was living right next door." As the interview concluded, Marcus noticed movement. In the Blackwood house, Karen appeared at her front door, her face haggard and her perfect composure finally cracked. She looked around at the news crews, the police cars, the neighbors who had emerged from their houses to watch the spectacle. "Mrs. Blackwood," a reporter called out, "do you have any comment on your husband's arrest?" Karen's eyes found Marcus. Across the yard, for a moment, he saw something that might have been regret, or maybe just the realization that her actions had consequences she hadn't anticipated. Then her expression hardened into the familiar mask of superiority. "I have nothing to say," she said coldly. "This is all a misunderstanding that will be cleared up soon." But as she spoke, Jessica appeared behind her mother, her young face etched with a maturity that shouldn't have been necessary at 16. "Mom, stop," Jessica said, loud enough for the cameras to catch. "Just stop. Dad's been stealing money from the city for months. I've seen the documents. And you've been harassing the Williams family since they moved in because you can't stand having black neighbors." The reporter's eyes lit up. This was the soundbite that would lead every newscast. In the city, a politician's daughter exposing both her father's corruption and her mother's racism in real time. "Jessica, get inside right now," Karen hissed, but it was too late. The damage was done. "No, Mom. I'm done pretending our family is something it's not. These people next door are good people. They've been nothing but kind to us, and you've treated them like criminals just for existing." Marcus watched Karen's face cycle through emotions: anger, embarrassment, desperation. She grabbed Jessica's arm and pulled her inside, but not before the cameras caught every word. "Well," Uncle Charles said quietly, "that's going to be on the evening news." As the media circus continued, Marcus's family began the process of cleaning up from the party. The celebration had been disrupted, but not destroyed. If anything, the events of the evening had brought them closer together, reminded them of the importance of standing up for each other in the face of injustice. "Marcus," Grandma Rose called from her wheelchair. "Come sit with me for a minute." He settled into the chair beside her, watching as his cousins loaded leftover food into containers and his nieces and nephews helped fold up tables. "Tell you something," she said, her voice soft but clear. "I've lived in this neighborhood for 67 years. I've seen it change, seen families come and go, but I've never seen anything quite like what happened tonight." "What do you mean, Grandma?" "That woman thought she could use the police to put us in our place. She thought because she was white and we were black, because her husband had a title, and we were just regular folks, that she could make us feel small." Rose's eyes were bright with something that looked like pride, but she forgot something important. "What's that?" She forgot that the truth has a way of coming out, and she forgot that sometimes, when you try to destroy good people, has a way of turning the tables. Marcus nodded, understanding. "You think this was karma?" "I think this was justice," Rose said firmly. "Not the kind you get in courtrooms, but the kind that comes from living right and treating people with respect. We didn't do anything to hurt that family. We just lived our lives with dignity, and when they tried to tear us down, their own actions brought them low." As if summoned by their conversation, Jessica appeared at the property line. She'd been crying, and her eyes were red-rimmed, but her expression was determined. "Mr. Williams," she called out, "could I talk to you for a minute?" Marcus walked over to the fence, Uncle Charles and Sarah flanking him. This girl had just destroyed her family's reputation to defend theirs, and he wasn't sure what to expect. "I wanted to apologize," Jessica said, her voice shaking, "for everything. For how my parents treated you, for the things my mom said, for all of it. You didn't deserve any of this." "Jessica, you don't have anything to apologize for," Marcus said gently. "You did the right thing tonight." "I should have done it sooner," she said, wiping her eyes. "I should have stood up to them months ago, but I was scared, and I thought maybe if I just kept quiet, things would get better." "Standing up to your parents takes courage," Sarah said, "especially when you know it's going to cost you something." "It's going to cost me everything," Jessica said quietly. "My mom isn't speaking to me. My dad's probably going to prison, and I'm going to have to live with the fact that I let this go on for so long." "No," Uncle Charles said firmly. "You're going to live with the fact that when it mattered most, you chose to do the right thing. That's not something to regret, something to be proud of." Jessica nodded, tears flowing freely now. "I just wanted you to know that not everyone on this street feels the way my parents do, and I'm sorry it took something like this for me to find the courage to say it." As Jessica walked back to her house, Marcus felt a complex mix of emotions. The evening had started as a simple birthday celebration and had become something much larger, reckoning with the kind of casual racism that too many families faced, and a reminder that sometimes justice came from unexpected places. The news crews were packing up their equipment, the story captured and ready for broadcast. By morning, the entire city would know about the corrupt councilman who'd been arrested while his wife harassed their neighbors. The Williams family would be portrayed as the innocent victims of a neighbor's prejudice, while the Blackwoods would be remembered as the family that fell from grace through their own actions. But Marcus knew the real story was simpler than that. It was about a family that had gathered to celebrate love and tradition and had refused to be